Welcome to Intentional Divorce Insights. I'm Leah Hadley, certified divorce financial analyst, accredited financial counselor, and the founder of Intentional Divorce Solutions. I'll be your guide through the complexities of divorce, finance, and emotional wellness. Join me as we uncover practical tips and empowering insights to help you navigate your divorce with clarity and intention.
Welcome back to Intentional Divorce Insights. I'm your host, Leah Hadley, and today I have a great episode planned for you. I'm actually joined today by another certified divorce financial analyst, Jacki Roessler, and together we are diving into some of the most important financial questions we get asked about divorce. We are going to be talking about the biggest mistakes we see people make, the assets that often get overlooked, some red flags in settlement offers, and the worst financial advice we've ever heard for divorce. So if you are going through a divorce or even just thinking about it, this is a conversation that's going to give you all kinds of insights that you can save, that can really save you from making some costly mistakes and help you move forward with confidence. Let me tell you a little bit about Jacki. Jacki has been assisting clients and their attorneys as a CDFA since 1996. And I will tell you, there are very few people out there who can say that. I think the majority of the industry didn't even exist in 1996. So it's wonderful to have this wealth of knowledge. She is passionate about helping individuals, couples, and attorneys navigate the complex financial decisions and issues in divorce. Whether it's assisting clients in understanding their assets, cash flow, retirement account divisions, tax issues, or helping their attorneys understand how to divide RSUs, stock options, and complex retirement plans. Jacki's experience, her in-depth expertise, and empathy make her an invaluable resource. Thanks for being with us, Jacki.
Thanks, Leah. I'm so excited, and I'm so old.
No, you started when you were 10, right?
Right, yeah, at least, right.
So before we get into these questions, Jacki, just talk to us a little bit about what attracted you to doing this work. How'd you get started here?
Oh, that's a good question. So I am a child of divorce, and my mother was in a terrible financial situation when my parents got divorced. I was 6. So I was pretty young, and I remember how difficult it was for her. And when I was going to college, I was just interested in law. And so I ended up doing pre-law kind of program for my undergrad, and then decided that after taking some investment classes, that I loved investments and I loved economics, and it just seemed to go together well. And then I had a family member that was a divorce attorney when I was a baby financial advisor, and he would send me clients after the divorce to help invest their money as a favor to me, to help me build my practice. And after a couple of cases, I realized, so-and-so, they got the house, but they can't really afford to keep the house. And he said to me, well, that's not my problem. They asked me for the house and I got it. And right. I said, well, I think they thought it was your problem. And so he started getting me involved in cases early on to help clients analyze their budget, put it together, figure out if it was the right settlement for them. And then he introduced me to all of his divorce attorney friends. So I got to this point in my practice where I couldn't do divorce financial planning and regular investment planning. And this was what I loved, I think because of my background in it and wanting to help people in family situations like I have been. So that's how I got here.
Wonderful. And I will tell you, for our audience, one of the things that Jacki said really, really resonated with me. And that was that she saw people come to her after their divorce, and there were decisions that were made during the divorce process that were not in their best interest. So I think that's a really nice segue to some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, because unfortunately, a lot of folks out there are really leaning on their attorneys for the financial advice. And a lot of attorneys out there, that's just not their strength, right? Not all attorneys. There are some attorneys that are very financially savvy, but there are a lot who aren't, especially those who choose to be in family law specifically, because a lot of times they do have that where they want to help families, right? They're really focused on, but not necessarily the numbers or having that financial expertise, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's, it's a really good point. And I noticed this is a big difference from when I started a long time ago, when no one had heard of what a certified divorce financial analyst was. That attorneys would say, "Well, I do that. We don't need to have a CDFA because I do that." I don't hear that anymore. It's very rare. I mean, the knowledge in the general public about what a divorce financial planner does has really spread. So I don't run across that, but what I do run across now are attorneys that maybe aren't thinking about the long-term financial impact, and they don't know how to counsel their clients about that. So even the most financially savvy lawyer isn't going to run financial projections with clients.
That's right. But they will know when to ask for them, right?
They do. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So, Jacki, one of the things I want to talk about is some of the financial mistakes that you see in your work. Talk to us a little bit about what some of the top ones are.
Oh, the big mistakes are getting emotionally tied to any one particular asset. And it's easy for me to say that because things like the house and your pension do have emotional ties to them. But when people get really stuck in, I have to keep this, and they don't, I'm totally fine with the client looking at financial projections, seeing that they're going to run out of money shorter if they keep the house, but they are aware of it. And they've been given that information and they still make that decision. I think that's fine. To me, the bigger mistake is not having any idea what you're up against. So people that I have to keep the house, but I really don't know what the ongoing carrying costs of the house are. I don't know what kind of work needs to be done on the inside. I haven't had an inspector come in and look at the house and tell me what needs to be fixed as if I was buying it from someone else, which you are. If you take the house, you are buying it from your spouse. If you are taking it in the settlement. So that lack of knowledge, I feel like that is the biggest mistake that I see clients make.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really not taking the time to deal with the emotional piece of it and trying to just force your way through the emotion and deal with all these decisions that need to be made when you're just not ready to make those decisions yet, right? You need that mental clarity, that space. Yeah. And I know even for myself, Jacki and I were just talking, my mother passed away recently, and I took a step back from doing some client work because I knew mentally I just didn't have the capacity to be with her and trying to do complex analysis or whatever, right? But I think that's very real. When people are going through a divorce, you have this fog. You're so overwhelmed with all the changes that are happening. There's so much emotion tied to it. And then especially some of the younger families that I see, they do these like horse trades with child-related things and money. And I really, really, really encourage people to separate those things out. I don't know how you talk to clients about that, Jacki, but like taking the emotion out, when you put the kids in, you add even more emotion, right?
Right. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. I think there's only so much mental bandwidth that people have. And that's why a lot of times I will encourage clients to think about renting for a year.
Yes.
You don't have to make that big decision about where you're going to land right now. And people will, push back and say, well, aren't I throwing the money away? And not really. I mean, in the early years of a mortgage, you're not paying down the principal anyway. You're just paying down the interest. And to make a mistake at that point and take on something that you can't afford or some place that you don't want to be because you're in a rush to make that decision, I think you are absolutely right. It's a time of complete overwhelm. Even if you're the one that wants the divorce, it's still overwhelming to make all of these financial decisions that are going to impact the rest of your life that you can't ever go back and change. It is a lot. And whatever you can try to mitigate, the better.
Absolutely. And I have to agree with Jacki around renting. I mean, I think a lot of people know, when you lose a spouse, you try not to make a lot of financial decisions right away, right? Like people recognize that people are grieving when they lose a spouse, and it's a very difficult time to make decisions. But when you're going through a divorce, it is also similarly emotionally overwhelming, but there's pressure to make all these decisions right away, right? And so instead of pushing yourself to make every single decision, something like renting kind of buys you time to kind of figure out like, what is my next step? And you're going to lose a whole lot more money in transaction costs if you're buying and selling real estate because you made a bad purchase because you weren't ready to make that decision, right? Than you'll ever lose renting.
Right, absolutely. And so I always give clients when the divorce is done, I meet with all clients when the divorce is done for a free wrap-up meeting, which I do it for free because I think it's so important that we do that, where we go through, this is what needs to get done in the first 3 months. This is what needs to get done in the first 6 months and the first year, because not everything needs to get done right away. Whereas some things, and that would lead to, I guess, another big mistake that I see people make, some things need to be addressed immediately. Right. And the longer you wait for them after the divorce is done, the more you're opening yourself up to potential disaster and aggravation and cost in terms of legal fees. And so, but not everything has to be handled right away after the divorce. So I think that, again, like you're talking about, breaking things down into bite-sized pieces that are manageable for people to do rather than, these are all the things you have to do, go get them done.
Right. It's so true. And I will tell you, we do some forensic work, not a ton of forensic work, but it's amazing the cases that we get post-divorce where we have to do this analysis because people have moved money around since that final settlement agreement. And now we have to figure out exactly where it went and who it belongs to and all of that.
I know.
And we're talking many thousands of dollars between our analysis and the legal fees associated with it. It's a lot, right?
It is a lot. And the longer people wait to do, and I think, again, there's this false idea that quadros are expensive and take a lot of time and are complicated to do. Quadro is the legal document that awards qualified money, retirement plan money through an employer to the other spouse when you get divorced. But that IRA's transfers are just so simple and easy, and they're not. And every custodian has a different form that needs to be filled out, and sometimes they need to have something signed by the court. Sometimes they don't. You have to have cooperation between the clients. And as soon as the divorce is done, anybody can move their money out of an IRA account. So it's so important that gets handled, like you're saying, right away, rather than try to put the toothpaste back in the tube and figure out where did this money go. And somebody added money to this one. And it's those transfers after the divorce is done are really cumbersome.
Absolutely. So this kind of leads into our next question. What are some of the biggest overlooked assets in a divorce?
I believe everything for me is always based on my recent cases. And for whatever reason, I tend to get the same kind of case all at one time. So I've got, either 20 cases where everybody is a doctor, or everybody is, everyone has RSUs. That's my new thing, is that everyone that I work with, it seems like they or their spouse have a lot of employee benefits that the other person doesn't have. And that gets overlooked a lot. So company stock, things that are assets that are unvested for executives that are just treated like, well, they're not vested, so that must be worth nothing. That is a big mistake. A lot of clients get their meals reimbursed from work, meals that their spouse has to pay for on their own. That doesn't get taken into consideration. And those kinds of things can add up. A company car doesn't get added back to income. So that's where I see a lot of overlooked assets would be in employee perks and not valuing those properly.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you think?
So for me, I think what comes up as little surprises, big surprises, I guess I should say, pensions. A lot of times people, for whatever reason, they just think it's my name on the pension, so it's my pension. And it's not necessarily something that we're going to talk about. And even, folks coming from federal jobs, they have a pension. Like, I'm going to bring it up. I know it's out there, but even like a lot of universities, like if I just look up, or if some of the hospital systems, a lot of the information is publicly available on these things. But sometimes we have to go back through, old pay stubs and things like that to find some of this information.
Wow.
Sometimes it's people just truly forgot about it. I mean, I do see that where people have that old
pension from an old company.
Yeah, that they're just not thinking about. That does happen. And there's old retirement account. I mean, that stuff happens. People aren't forgetting about large sums of money, so they're not really moving the needle in a meaningful way. However, pensions people don't have enough understanding of. And so sometimes that can be a much larger asset than they realize.
That is true. That's very interesting. I'm in Detroit. I'm in the Detroit area. So I'm in the heart of the automotive business, and a lot of the automotive, the big employers certainly do, and even some of the suppliers have pensions still.
Yeah.
And so we are, unfortunately, very familiar with dealing with pensions. But when you have like you said, a government employee, sometimes those are assets that people just say, well, that's mine. Or a part of it, like you said, that accumulated from a previous asset or from a previous employer that gets overlooked. I had one recently where a husband forgot that he had a pension at his employer, even though we'd asked for that information and actually subpoenaed the company, and it still was not provided. So luckily for him, he found it and he disclosed it. That was good that he did that, and my client's getting half of it now. But we have a law in Michigan that if you don't disclose an asset, the other side has the ability to request 100% of that asset if you specifically.
So I had a case in Texas where that happened. The husband did not disclose some stock options, and wife got awarded 100% of the options.
Wow. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's really so much information to be garnered when you go through the financials. And so, one of the challenges, I don't know about you, Jacki, but for me, one of the challenges is always getting all the information that's needed. And people often are like, why do you need so much information? But we want to make sure that everything's accounted for, right? And these different documents, sometimes these things show up in different ways.
They do. That is absolutely true. When I have, it seems like every client wants to give me a summary of all their assets.
Right.
So they maintain their own summary on a special software program that they use. And so, but I want to look at the statements because the statements show me what's vested, what's not vested, if there's a loan against it. If my client has 100% of their assets in Microsoft stock, I need to know that because we've got some extra risk going into the divorce process when that happens. But if I don't get statements, then it's like pulling teeth to get statements sometimes.
It can be. Absolutely. Yeah. So what are some of the red flags that you see in settlements?
Some of the red flags that I see in settlements. I see a lot of settlements where the language is not specific enough in the final agreement. So for the attorneys that I work with on a regular basis, they'll send me the final settlement agreement before it's signed to go through, because a small change in the wording, whether it has to do with the division of retirement accounts, how taxes are going to be treated between the parties going forward on certain things, that small change in wording can have a huge impact on the final settlement. And I mean, I've actually seen settlements before. In my previous job that I had related to this, I had a practice where we drafted quadros with my ex-husband. And so we did about 1,000 quadros a year. So we saw lots of judgments of divorce. I would often see something in the settlement agreement that says, wife to get 50% of pension with all bells and whistles. Like that is not appropriate. What bells, what whistles? So, I mean, that kind of really vague language to me is a red flag. And I also find, even when it comes to when we have modifiable support, not putting in the settlement agreement what the income was that was used for each party. Because if we go to modify, it's helpful to have that baseline. So, so-and-so, my client might have been a stay-at-home spouse and we didn't have, wasn't earning any income. She gets a job now, she's earning, let's say, $30,000, but they had already imputed $25,000 to her. That being in the settlement agreement, not part of the public record, but in something that everyone signed and agreed to, is really helpful. The more details, the better in the final agreement.
I agree. And I will say, not just the details, but also the deadlines and the consequences if deadlines aren't met, and just everything that can be spelled out to avoid future conflict is essentially, right?
No, absolutely. So what happens if so-and-so doesn't pay out the person's interest in the house by this many days, or if they're late on a payment? And a good attorney will do all of those things, but it never hurts to have a second pair of eyes. I like to have a second pair of eyes look at my work. So just to have somebody else with experience to say, you're going to want more detail on how these extracurricular expenses are being handled, because that's going to come up and bite you if you don't have that.
Well,
right.
and I like that you said that specifically, because I think that is one of the most important things that a CDFA can do for a client, is to really look out for the financial risk, right? The attorneys are looking through that legal lens, right? And they're making sure their language is all buttoned up, but they're not necessarily looking for where's the financial risk and what's going to happen if X, Y, and Z happens, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so
And then
much
the
fun
other
to talk to another CDFA.
Well, the other piece I was hearing you talk about doing all those quadros, which, oh my gosh, my brain hurts just thinking about all those quadros. But anyway, another thing that comes up often, I can't get over how often this comes up, but accounts being mislabeled in the final settlement agreement, whether it's a
Uh-huh.
401k
Yeah.
that's being named by the custodian rather than the employer. Or, there's so many different examples of types of accounts that are mislabeled. And I know that if they're not in there correctly, then when you were looking at the values, you probably weren't considering the taxes correctly. If
Yes. Right.
so there are all those pieces around making sure that
Mhm.
everything is really identified, because that's the document that you use to then get everything accomplished post divorce, right?
And I don't think people realize how often they're going to be looking back at that document
Yeah.
when they're done, and how often you're going to be reanalyzing the wording and say, well, what did we mean by that? And so I think, too, for any listeners, if you have questions about the agreement and the way it's worded, there isn't any question that you should be afraid to ask. What does this mean? No one expects you to be an expert when it's your divorce. You've only been through it once, maybe twice, but you're not supposed to be the expert. And if it doesn't look right to you and it's confusing to you now, it's probably going to be confusing later.
Yeah. So this is a good question. I think it's a fun one that will help people maybe think about some things a little bit differently, right? But what is some of the worst financial advice that you have heard in a divorce, Jacki?
Oh, the worst financial advice. A lot of times, not coming from attorneys. I will say that I have not had experiences lately where I think the attorneys that I work with are so good. I don't hear clients getting bad financial advice from their attorneys. I do sometimes hear clients getting bad financial advice from their spouse, or I hear them getting bad financial advice from a current financial advisor. So a good example would be the spouse that says, we have Microsoft stock, but we shouldn't liquidate that for anything. We shouldn't use that because that's the gold standard of what we have. And so they treat it almost like it's monopoly money. I've had that in a few cases where we can't touch that, where now the client that is receiving that asset feels like they can't move the money around into something more appropriate for their financial needs. And so that, I think, is troublesome. Or when we don't take into consideration someone got all the highly appreciated stock and somebody else got cash, or their financial advisor maybe is advising them to keep you want to make sure you get part of that, you keep that annuity and the other person gets a different asset. Well, the annuity might not be the right asset for the client. I oftentimes find that annuities are not the right assets for the clients that I'm working with, but they feel like they can't let go of a product that they have or a specific asset, even if it doesn't work for their financial future, for their financial goals, for their cash flow needs.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think, financial advisors are well-meaning, but a lot of them don't have the experience doing the divorce work, whereas CDFAs really do work hand in hand with attorneys. I mean, we are working and talking with attorneys every single day, right? And so in that process, you learn a lot about how the law in your area looks at financial issues in a divorce case that may feel very foreign to a financial advisor who's not typically
Right.
doing that kind of work, right? And so I think it's really, really important for people to recognize where their limitations are around their own knowledge, right? And to you always think of the doctor examples, right? Like, you're not going to go to a neurologist when you have a heart problem, right? But there's a reason that people say that, right? That person has a tremendous amount of education in that area. And if you really need that specialty, then you want to make sure that you're getting guidance from somebody who has the experience to give it.
Right. I mean, and I think I run across this more times than I'd care that I wish I had. I run across so many cases where the financial advisor says, yes, we can split up that annuity. Yeah. And you can usually split up, so there's no tax due on any transfer of assets between spouses when you get divorced. So it's not taxable. That's true. But every annuity company has their own policy on whether or not they're going to split up a contract. And if they are willing to split it up, and sometimes they are, they're going to open up a brand new contract for the second person with a brand new surrender charge and completely different terms than was sold in the beginning. So that's a common mistake. And again, I don't fault the financial advisor necessarily, because they don't, when they're selling it, they're not thinking about the fact that whether or not this is going to be divisible if the clients get divorced. But it is something that I think if they don't know, they should be calling the custodians to find out, and not advising clients, oh yeah, we could just go ahead and divide that. I think that's a problem. I also think it's problematic when we have a financial advisor that has a fiduciary responsibility to both people, because they're both signed the retainer agreement for financial planning, but they're only advising one client to the detriment of the other. And I think, again, it's tricky for a financial advisor when one client that's getting divorced might ask you for assistance, but you have some responsibilities to give advice to both people in that scenario. And I see that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's very true. And the other thing that I was thinking about as it relates to just bad advice, and I think, I get it where people are reaching out for help on social media platforms, or even if it's just within your own family, maybe you're hearing guidance and advice from people who maybe have gone through their own divorce, or their sister went through a divorce, or their mother went through a divorce, or somebody they know, right? But one of the things that I see in my practice is that every case really is unique. I mean, everybody's financial situation is different, income is different, expenses are different, assets, debts, like they're all very unique. And so I personally, as a professional doing this with lots of people, would never say, well, this happened on, for this person, so that means for you, that's the case, right?
Exactly.
Instead,
right.
It's, let me ask more questions about your situation. And even like when people are posting stuff in Facebook groups or different places online, I'm always like, there's just not enough information to give you a real answer. And then there's like 100 comments with answers. And I'm sitting here scratching my head like, but there wasn't enough information in the question to give an answer. How are all these people commenting, right?
Yeah. I love Jean Chatzky's podcast, Her Money. I love that podcast. But every now and again in their mailbag, they have a question about divorce. And the answer is too definitive always. I feel like, wait a minute. You don't have enough information. You couldn't possibly have given that definitive advice without knowing this, this, and this. And it's so specific to what state you live in. Right. And like you said, every client, I've never had two cases that were identical in 30 years.
And even within a state, right? Like I see, because we work in a lot of different courts in Ohio, and I see the differences between the different courts. I mean, they all have their own thing going on. So just broadly generally say, and that's also why I like working with the attorneys closely, because, when you're working with somebody who's regularly in that court, knows how that particular court looks at these different issues. That's so
even
valuable.
the judge, even the specific judge in the same courtroom, different judges have different attitudes about things. So it's, I agree with you. I think that it really makes me cringe when I see in moms groups that I'm in, when I see advice that people are giving about divorce. I just have to try not to say anything, or, when people ask for a referral for, a great attorney and names come up that, because I do this all the time and I've been doing it for a long time, people that don't specialize in divorce, that's a big mistake to not pick someone as your attorney who does this on a regular basis.
For sure. And even that's a simple question that people ask in groups all the time. Who would you recommend as an attorney? Well, I will tell you, when people ask me that question, I have 5 follow-up questions before I'm going to give you an answer.
Right.
Because one particular attorney has they're people, right? And they all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses, and every case is different. And so cases have different needs, right? And so you want to match somebody who's good for your case and your situation, not necessarily who's, the most expensive or whatever the case may be.
Right. Or that your best friend said that she got a great deal with. Yeah.
Well, Jacki, I have no doubt that you and I could just talk about this all day because I have so many more things that I could talk about it. So this was Jacki's idea, the kind of back and forth of two CDFAs, and I absolutely have enjoyed this conversation and loved doing this with you. So thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Oh, good. And for our audience, remember that divorce is not just a legal process. It is a major financial transition. And the decisions that you make now can shape your future for many years to come. So hopefully this conversation gave you some things to think about, maybe some light bulb moments. If you want more information or resources, support as you navigate the process, we have a wealth of resources on our website, and we will be sure to include a link to that in the show notes. But I'm sure that Jacki has resources to share as well. Where can people find out more about you, Jacki?
So I have a podcast called the Divorce Rich Podcast, and it provides resources for different people. My website is roessledivorce.com. That's ROESSLER, divorce.com. And we have all kinds of resources for clients that they can download.
Fantastic. And we'll include all of that information in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for joining me on Intentional Divorce Insights. It's a privilege to share this time with you. I hope each episode offers valuable guidance to navigate your journey. If you find our content helpful, please leave a review to help others discover the benefits of intentional decision-making in divorce. Until next time, take care and continue to embrace your path with intention.